Hi Carl, lovely to meet up with you and do some further work on your game. Just a quick recap on the points that we discussed on Saturday evening. First of all, we talked about your setup. A little bit too much of a sort of straight base to the spine, and then the base of the neck tends to be a little bit too upright, and the eyes are looking sort of out this way naturally. Consequently, you're almost sort of looking down your nose at the golf ball this way. Lends itself to, as we see here, a very much a straight back takeaway, left shoulder working quite level, which then requires you to side bend the wrists to move the club onto the inside. And when we got into it, we discussed, or you mentioned that you'd been advised to keep your chin up, when actually, you know, when you look at the construction of your spine, you've got a situation where the base of the spine, when it's in a certain position, is level, shall we say, flat. The upper section of the spine, so where your neck is, tends to sit a little bit flatter than that, and then the midsection of your spine tends to be a little bit more curved. You're pretty much, your posture naturally is pretty much straight in the back, but certainly not shoulder blades pulled back. Certainly not chin held up excessively. So what we got now is you've got your eyes more down at the golf ball in a little bit more of a natural position, which lends itself then, or allows you to work the hands back a little bit more inwards during the takeaway, which requires you to side bend the wrists a little bit less. Now you're still side bending the wrist quite a bit there, which is something we'll touch on in coming sessions. But by and large, the posture that you're establishing there at setup is more appropriate. We also touched on the handle location at setup and advised you that rather than pointing the handle above the belt buckle so much, try and feel like it points more at the line of the belt. You found that sort of tricky to do at first. It's something that we talked about, you know, gradually work your way towards that belt line. Don't treat it as a quick fix. Just try and keep gradually lowering the handle. As you lower the handle, the upper spine is going to start to curve, or the mid spine is going to start to curve forward a little bit more. Shoulders are going to push this way a little bit more naturally, and the eyes are going to start to point down at the golf ball a little bit more. So just gradually work towards a lower handle and eyes more down at the golf ball. It's going to make it much easier for you to make the sort of takeaway you want, where the lead shoulder works down, the wrists start to set gradually rather than push the club in behind the hands, and it makes a more stable turn when viewed from face on. So there were the changes at setup. The main thing we wanted to look at after your previous session was where the club got at P5. So we tended to, at P5, get the club sitting quite steep through the right shoulder, and we said last time that we wanted to try and get that a little bit shallower, get an accumulator 3, which is the back of the left hand, a little bit more loaded, which would drop the shaft down, and your goal ultimately is to have the shaft on the mid right bicep by the time you get to P5. So this is one of your sort of towards the back end of your session, but you're demonstrating the moves that you were making. You've already started to get a little bit deeper at P4, which is going to help. So rather than the arms working straight back and up, the arms are starting to work gradually inwards and around the body a little bit more. As you change direction now at P5, shaft is more sort of down on the bicep than it was previously. Previously it was too close to that right shoulder at P5, so the shaft was setting steep. And then what you had to do from there is, once the shaft got steep at P5, the rest of the downswing was an act of shallowing the descent and trying to get the club to come on the inside, or certainly come outside less. So we see things like the head lifting quickly, all the inclination to the ground that we had at setup being lost, handle of the club raising rapidly through the hip. But from there you had no way of controlling the exit, so the club gets flung off the chest, or the arms get flung off the chest, club gets flung away from you, and that's producing a shot pattern that is a little bit too prone to the occasional low point issues. but mainly pushes to the right and overdraws stroke pull hooks to the left. So going from very steep P5 to P7, we've got to try and get shallower, and we do that by standing up and dumping the wrist angles. From this shallower position, we can work on introducing a little bit more of a rotation without the fear of the club getting pulled out excessively. Body starts to open up a little bit more. As we introduce a little bit more rotation, the rate at which we extend starts to calm down. So even though we still see the head raising slightly, the handle raising slightly, a little bit more than we would want ultimately, it's starting to balance itself out. As you come through the hip, the arms don't get flung off the rib cage quite as fast or quite as much. And upon exiting, if we look where the hands exit the body, the exit is starting to get substantially lower than it was in your previous sessions. You're also seeing a little change there in regards to the way the trail foot looks. Rotation starting to pull the right heel round a little bit more. Back belt loop starting to come round a little bit more. So the body's rotation is more continuous. We see that the shoulder tilts aren't quite as severe coming through the ball. These are all things that as the exit gets lower, we'll start to see soften up. These are all things that you've used in the past to bring the club from a relatively steep position at P5 to a shallower position at P7. We're starting to see that this right arm, we've got a little bit bend in it, which is fine, but we don't want that bend to be excessive. So we're starting to see that that is softening up a little bit, as opposed to being quite severe on your first visit. So we're seeing the arm, the forearm and the shaft line up a little bit more, and again it's a sign that the swing is going to be less out to the right and a little bit more in line. So to recap, we want a much deeper P5 like we've got here. Once we're deeper at P5, rather than P5 to 7 being an extension and an uncocking of the wrist to shallow out the descent, to stop the swing going too much to the left, the swing now can be more of a continuous rotation. We're still sliding and extending. We still want to see the wrist angles come out a little bit, but not to the same degree. I'm going to use the bar to the left shoulder to encourage that. So using the bar to the left shoulder encourages the chest to continuously rotate through the ball and starts to encourage that move that we want from 5 to 7. So P5's got to be deeper. Still want to add some detail to that. Still want to add some improvement to that. But from the position you are now in on the right, you can learn to open up through the shot. The player on the left has to learn to shallow out the shaft. Like I say, we discussed on the day, you can do that in any number of ways. Your way is to stand up very quick and dump the wrist angles very quick. On the right, you can start to learn to gradually rotate through the shot. As you do that, the rate at which the head comes up starts to diminish massively, and your ability to maintain the angles that you had at address starts to improve dramatically also. So we look at the spine, particularly the upper section of it, the base of it, at impact compared to where it was at address. You can see that you're in a much more similar position at impact than you were previously. So much less of an extension, much more gradual extension. Still a little bit too much in there, we want to soften that up as we go, but much less standing up through the hip, much less severe, and you're moving in the right direction. Good luck with it, and I look forward to meeting up with you again in a few weeks' time to do some further work.